The Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show. This one is brought to you with Levi Solicitors, who will offer you a 10% discount on your legal fees at levisolicitors.co.uk/the Square Ball. We're going back in time today on the Square Ball Guide. Dan Moylan with Michael Normanton and Dean Smith. 2000, the millennium.
What a year.
What did you do?
I was knocking about being an idiot. It was my final year at secondary school. Quite inauspicious academically. Just about passed enough stuff.
Enough to get a job at ITV that you'd end up resenting?
Ultimately, yes. Yeah. And that was always the aim at the time. I had big dreams. Yeah. Big dreams as a 15, 16-year-old. It was a good year for Leeds, though.
This was prime of my life stuff, this. 22 years old. After university. Bit panicky about what to do going into the real world. But, here we are. We made it this far. Dean?
I was 10. So this is proper formative football years. Going to Elland Road with me dad, and seeing really, really good football and a really good football team, and just setting myself up for a huge disappointment across the next 20 lots of years. But no, this was real excitement. Elland Road under the lights. All of that was in the year 2000. Oh, you couldn't keep me away.
My son is a similar age to that, and he still can't believe that we were in the Champions League way back when. It's like a distant myth, a dream. I guess
not even long ago.
But it was almost like, but he wasn't born until like 2011. But I would say it's the same way that we kind of mythologise like the Revie team, I suppose. But we were there at Elland Road, Champions League, in the pouring rain. One man who wasn't there, Mark Viduka. And this is confusing because Champions League, this game took place on the 19th of September 2000, and yet Mark Viduka is away for the Olympics. And then we started to join the dots on this and realised that the Olympics took place in September, October that year, because obviously the Southern Hemisphere summer is the opposite to the Northern Hemisphere. So summer up here, winter down there. So they did it somewhere in between.
Very sneaky of them.
Yeah, but it meant it disrupted our season as well because we didn't have Mark Viduka for this game.
And he was too old to be playing in the Olympics anyway. Should have grown up. You're meant to be under 23, aren't you, to be part of it? But you're allowed some overage players.
The chance to play in his home nation, I suppose, was too much to turn down.
Didn't matter though. We had Michael Bridges, who was excellent, alongside Alan Smith, who was also tenacious.
That is a really good way to describe it. I remember seeing the strike force for Milan for this as well. Oliver Bierhoff and Andrei Shevchenko up front, and going, wow, that's proper starstruck stuff, is that?
And then what was your reaction when you saw our defence?
Well, this is it. So we've got a slightly makeshift back four, assorted full backs and defenders in there. Named in the side, Gary Kelly. It was Michael Dubry who I remember specifically marking Andrei Shevchenko and thinking, that's not going to work. Danny Mills, Ian Hart, and Dominic Matteo also in the side, who was just freshly signed, who obviously became synonymous with AC Milan, but for slightly different reasons. But this was one of the very, very early games, wasn't it? Was it even his debut?
It was his debut, right. And it was one of the many positions he played. So he's kind of left wing in this one, but he goes centre mid sometimes left back, sometimes centre back. Did a bit of everything for us, did Don.
Yeah, so the lineup, Nigel Martin in goal. Yeah, Kelly, Dewberry, Mills and Hart, Bowyer, Backer, DeCourt, and Matteo, Smith and Bridges, Leeds United. It was something approaching a 4-4-2. There's none of your fancy 4-2-3-1s or any of that business back then. It was 4-4-F in 2.
I mean, Smith seems to have the freedom to just roam around and upset people, but that's just the position he played always in these games.
You can start to see the slightly threadbare nature of Leeds' team when you look through the bench, can't you, Dean? Like Paul Robinson's on there as keeper, but Darren Huckabee, then you're into Matt Jones, Danny Hay, Jacob Burns, Evans, who I can't remember his first name.
As you were approaching Evans, then I thought, best of luck.
Steve
Evans.
Steve Evans.
Yes. Yeah. He had a sombrero on the night, if you remember it. It was really well known.
Yeah, and Tony Hackworth.
Was it? I'm trying to remember it now. I'm thinking of Tony Evans, but is he a journalist?
But yeah, he's the Scouts journalist, isn't he, Tony Evans? Well, we'll have a Google of it and come back to it. Up against a Milan team with some incredible names in it. Helveg, Maldini, have you heard of that guy?
Mm.
Yeah. Costa Curta, Albertini, Chamot, Giunti, Juli, Koku, Bierhoff and Shevchenko. You're 11 there. And have you seen who's on the bench for AC Milan? Have you seen? Go on.
Roque Jr.
Roque Jr.
Leeds legend.
And one of the Ninja Turtles there as well, Leonardo.
Excellent, yeah. It's weird, this AC Milan team, because there are still remnants of the kind of prime Channel 4 Italian players, like Maldini and Albertini and people like that were the mainstays of that AC Milan team that were brilliant as well. The kind of mid-90s was their dominant period, wasn't it? And they just were the best team. So having gone from, we'd played Roma the year before as well, and this just felt like just that little bit of a step up, didn't it? It's like we were playing a really good Italian team last year, and they had Totti and they had Del Vecchio up front, but then this was just a little bit extra, wasn't it? And Shevchenko was the big sort of young star of Europe at this time as well, wasn't he?
And jumping ahead a little bit, I remember watching him, the speed of his movement and how hard he hit shots. I can remember at some point, I'm fairly sure he picked up the ball, turned round so fast, span on the ball and shot, and he hit it so hard. I think it went over the bar from my memory. But I'm thinking, how's he done that? It was like he was doing like a different language almost, speaking a different language.
Do you know who taught him that? Kicking it hard. One of my earliest students.
Mere slip of a boy.
I wasn't a slip of a boy. It's quite a chubby boy, really.
Can you remember then being a kid, looking back at this and coming into this game off the back of a 4-0 away defeat to Barcelona in the first group game? And we hadn't started the season that badly in general, but we had sandwiched this game between a home defeat to Ipswich and then a draw at Derby, which all feels a little bit low rent when you're playing AC Milan, doesn't it?
I remember going into this game. The first thing that I recall is the weather. It was absolutely lashing it down. The second thing is probably the most exciting thing that can happen to a 10-year-old, and it's here in the Champions League anthem at Elland Road. As a 10-year-old, it doesn't get any better than that. This is when ITV had all the highlights. So for the last couple of years, I'd been watching, Real Madrid, AC Milan, these huge teams on the telly, and hearing that anthem, thinking, oh my God, imagine if that could be blasted out of the speakers at Elland Road.
Shaking the football as well, the Champions League ball in the centre
And because
circle.
it was raining, all of the water's dancing off it and the lights coming off it, it was just absolutely magical. I didn't really know much about AC Milan at the time, I was 10 years old, but I remember my dad on the way in saying to me, we need to watch out for this Shevchenko character. And I didn't know anything about him. And as the game started to progress, I realised that he was up against Dubry. I was up against Mills, who's playing left-sided centre-back as a right-back. And it just became quite apparent this was going to be a very, very long evening. But one thing that you can say about the highlights, there are a lot of highlights on YouTube for this game, 10, 20 minutes worth. We put up a hell of a fight. And that's one thing that I think is missing in the Champions League era now. You don't see people with blonde highlights charging around trying to smash people.
Yeah, simpler times when there was no VAR, so you could leave one on someone.
Yeah.
Alan Smith very much in this game picking up where he left off against Roma, actually, because I think that ended up with them getting a couple of players sent off because Alan Smith just upset everyone on the pitch to the extent that people were just booting off left, right and centre.
I mean, this is the thing, as a kid, you're sort of guided down the path of not like stereotyping entire nations of people, and you're quite idealistic and you don't want to do that. But that was the proper archetypal Italian head loss, wasn't it? And I remember watching that thinking, surely they realise what's happening here and they're not going to buy into being wound up like this. But they absolutely were. And it was an echo of Sampdoria, actually, in the Makita tournament in the summer of 1992, showing that you could genuinely wind up Italian players.
I mean, Alan Smith was excellent at this, we have to say. I know obviously the scum thing happened, but in this era, like he would do it against people like experienced English players too. Like I remember him really getting Martin Keown upset a couple of times. And pretty sure Tony Adams was upset with him on occasion as well. But in this, he gets Maldini upset. Like the very cream of Europe.
The lack of respect.
And he's just really, really irritating him.
Yeah. That's what it was all about, wasn't it, when he was at his strongest. And you do wonder whether they had a conversation off the back of that 4-0 in the new camp and said, look, we're going to have to go out there and impose ourselves on these games and almost go down the route of they don't like it up them.
Yeah. And we had good players for it because Smith and Bowyer were about as much of that as you could get, I think. And we kind of go into this, as you said, with the defeat and no expectations. I mean, Jermaine Wright has scored against us in the previous game. So you've got to go into this thinking we're losing. We are definitely.
Off the back of that 4-0 completely, you're thinking, well, it's a fun adventure. We'll play some big teams. I'll get to remember seeing these teams at Elland Road. We've got no serious chance. Barcelona proved that. Yeah.
And the team that we're putting out as well, it's one of those where you think, with a full strength team, maybe, but look at it. Look at the state of it. Admittedly, we didn't probably realise quite how bad Michael Dewberry was at this stage.
The thing is, though, he had the game of his life.
Yeah.
In this game. That was the game of his life. He was absolutely superb in this game.
We did ride our luck on occasions.
Of course we did, but you're up against some of the best, the cream of the striking talent in Europe before Shevchenko became a useless Chelsea bastard. But I remember it felt a little bit like a heroic performance, and the heroism, like kind of the mythology around it, obviously accentuated by the rain as well. Little things like the Champions League anthem, but the white Nike shirts as well, floodlights, Elland Road. I can see it in my mind still.
The Champions League anthem, I've just looked it up, it wasn't actually that old at this stage as well. It was only introduced when it turned from the European Cup to the Champions League. So it's only sort of 1992 onwards that this has been in existence, is this anthem. And it did feel, I don't know, maybe I've just got old, but it feels old now. It feels like it's just, I don't think it'd do the same to me now. Even if I was at Elland Road, I don't think it'd quite have the same effect because I've heard it too many times.
Maybe.
No, I'm not buying that.
You know?
No, if we get back into the Champions League, the hair on the back of your neck standing up, you're belting out.
Yeah. I mean, I nearly cried. It was the first post-pandemic game after promotion. Was it the Everton home game, the 2-2, when we got back into Elland Road properly for the first time? That brought me to the verge of tears. I was welling up and I had to fight it back because obviously I'm a stoic Yorkshireman and I'm not allowed to show any sort of emotion.
Yeah. No, that was fine though.
So this would, under the lights at Elland Road, the Champions League anthem, you're telling me that wouldn't move you?
All right, maybe it would.
You have no soul, Michael Normanton.
Maybe it would. Maybe I'm not as cynical as I think I am. It's weird though, because if you say to anyone the Champions League anthem, they will do an approximation of it like that. Obviously, no one knows the words.
It's in 3 languages, that's why.
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
But if you ask someone to hum the Premier League anthem, which is played before every game,
no idea.
Any idea?
You could type in like fanfare, couldn't you? On like
it's just a thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just a bit of noise that they play.
Some trumpets and that.
Maybe they should get a big flag.
Yeah. Maybe so.
The big centre circle flag's good. I will go along with that.
But you're right, I hadn't thought about the rain bouncing off that as it was being shaken.
Spectacular, especially as a 10-year-old. I don't know if you guys remember this as well. During that Champions League campaign, we weren't allowed to sell the first 3 rows of seats because the Champions League or UEFA, whoever it was, had a rule about size of hoardings. Yeah,
they were bigger than the Premier League ones, weren't they?
But only slightly. You could have got another couple of thousand people on those rows. But again, as a 10-year-old, I assumed that it was for some very magical reason. Maybe the cameras were going to be there or something. But watching it back, it does feel like a lot of Leeds fans were denied a ticket just because they wanted their grubby hands on Heineken sponsorship or something like that.
The corporate interest of football, it'll never catch on.
Never.
It's the people's game, isn't it? Football is for the fans.
I mean, looking back at those sponsors, it does seem quite nice when it wasn't sponsored by Russian energy companies and stuff. But I think they seem to have given up on Gazprom, don't they now?
Yeah,
as a Champions League sponsor.
But those guys, they could clean up their act and come back stronger. Give them a chance. But yeah, everybody remembers this game for the goal, and the fact that you go, well, do you know what? After a 4-0 at Barcelona in the new camp, where we left with our tail between our legs, admittedly a weakened team and all the rest of it, but to get out of this. When we have, as you say, rode our luck a little bit against AC Milan, thinking a respectable 0-0 against this strike force with a bit of a makeshift defence, you take it, don't you? But then,
I mean, it is raining. It is really raining. Like even Nigel Martin, when you see him on the highlights, even though he's got that thicker material of a goalkeeper shirt on, just looks like he's got out of the bath in it. Everyone is absolutely like to the skin. The pitch is not like the pitch now.
White shirts as well, nipples everywhere.
Oh, absolutely delightful. But yeah, the pitch is not like it is now where the water just sort of soaks through it. There were bits of standing water on the pitch, and when the shot comes in, absolutely no one even looks at it because you go, that's just being caught.
I think the kids these days, when my lad Sam is playing like FIFA and they shoot from distance, he goes, it's a bit dreamy. It felt a bit dreamy, didn't it? Like you're being a little bit optimistic. You're trying your luck with that one. But what's the phrase? If you don't buy and enter the lottery, buy a ticket.
Yes, that's the phrase. Yeah, that's the famous phrase. Yeah.
I think he just looked a bit tired. I think they'd been slogging their guts out trying to close down all these Milan players all game, and he's received the ball, and he's looked up and he's thought, got a sight of goal there, so I'm going to hit it. And he hits it, and fair play, like you just alluded to. If you don't buy a raffle ticket, you're not going to win the lottery or whatever it was.
I think that's exactly as I said it.
Exactly. But you hit the target, and then you ask a question of a keeper who is erratic at the best of times.
He was being flappy, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was coming out for corners and just about getting there. And his distribution didn't seem great, again, from the highlights clip on ITV. But this is one of those perfect moments, especially if this had been at 69 minutes, it wouldn't have felt quite as euphoric as it been in the 89th minute. Bacca wins the ball, plays it to Bowyer. Bowyer gets his head down, shoots. And I remember vividly, I was right behind, I was in the lower east, right behind Bowyer as he shot. And loads of people around me just kind of half turned away, expecting the ball just to be in Dida's hands.
Which it was.
Yeah. Well, for the splittest of seconds. Yeah. But then it bounces, and it bounces with such a lovely amount of twist on it, and then that net just crumples, and there we go. 1-0.
He seems so confused by it, does Dida. It's weird to see a professional goalkeeper, Brazil international, playing for AC Milan.
You can see the thought landing, can't you, as he goes, oh no.
It's the way he doesn't seem to know what the post, because he kind of, as he drops it into the net, he kind of bumps into the post as well, and it all just seems hugely clumsy from footballers who generally have just great awareness of where they are on the pitch and what's around them. He seems to not know he's that close to his line. He seems to not know where his goal post is. It's all just too wet for him, and he's like, oh, he's just checked out, it feels like, at this point. And then all of a sudden there's a shot, and he's like, oh, fuck. And he just drops it in. And I don't know if this goal is better. If Bowyer had rocketed this into the top corner, did we almost remember it as fondly as we do now? Or does it play into the whole pissing wet rain?
There's more of a myth, isn't there?
Yeah, it's more of a moment, I suppose, because people score good goals all the time. A 30-yard shot that gets dropped into the net is quite a rare thing.
It's a rare thing, and it comes as such a surprise as well, because you have that moment of preparation. If that leaves his boot and flies into the top corner, you get that mental journey of going, could it? Oh my God. But it all happens like subconsciously in your mind, and it hits the postage stamp, and you go, oh my God. Whereas, like you say, with this one, you're half just going, well, oh, bloody hell, look at that.
And I was also in the East Lower for this. I was kind of towards the pretty much halfway line, just a little bit across. They're now the premium seats. They were family seats at the time. But it was a fairly sedate bit of the ground I was in. But it fucking took off when this went in. Like, it was the whole...
It took a little while, but then when it landed...
once people realised it had gone in, it just went insane. It's about this, and probably the Roma game for the East Stand going mad. Probably about as crazy as it ever got in there, I would say. But just... as you say, as formative experiences go, this was just, it was right up there. It was kind of, it'd been the progression of beating, I'd seen us, beat Scum. I'd seen us beat Roma. AC Milan just felt like that just a little bit extra and a bit more glamour to it.
And the same night, Barcelona lost to Besiktas, who we ended up thumping 6-0 in that group stage.
Brought us back into it. Evened it all up.
It did. It really did. Didn't it? And final words on this one then to Lee Bowyer, who said, I had a shot from distance. Don't even know why I shot. I'm glad he did, though. I'm glad he did. 30 yards out. You can't even read from that distance, but it was really late on in the game, pouring with rain, and the rain up north is not the same as down here in the south. What do you think he means by that? Heavier, thicker, wetter?
Who's to say? It's Lee Bowyer.
Proper working class rain.
Slippier rain, yeah. Yeah. Different rain. I had a shot. Dida fumbled it. It went straight into his hands. It was an easy save for him to make. But now I joke and say it was too much power and it slipped through his hands and dropped just over the line. So we won 1-0, which was great.
Meanwhile, do you know what Mark Viduka was doing? Losing to Honduras that same day. What a waste of his life. Should have been at Elland Road. Do you know who else was in that Australia team? 2 Leeds links in there. You've got Hayden Fox and you've got Danny Milosevic in there.
What a time.
What a golden era for Australia.
Gareth Evans.
Mystery solved. Cheers, Dean.
Would you have got that?
Oh, yeah, I knew that. I was just testing.
Played once for us, according to Wikipedia.
Can you name the game?
I'm on his Wikipedia, so I probably could. But no, I wouldn't have otherwise been able to. Played for, Huddersfield and Blackpool.
Do you know what position he was, Dan?
Fullback.
Correct. Have you got it open as well?
Yeah.
The Square Ball Podcast.